YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my series review for Digimon Adventure 2020. Now, I covered this series a little bit sporadically because I covered it week to week, and then it didn't seem like people were interested in hearing about it every week. So I kind of took a break, and I kind of took a break from watching it and did catch-up chunks. It's been a long time since my last catch-up chunk. I had wanted to do one more before the finale, but it took me like 4 weeks to realize that Hulu had stopped carrying it after episode 44 or something like that. I had assumed that it was on break for golf or something like Toku will do. I didn't realize that that was a weird situation, so I decided, you know what, I'll just catch up on Crunchyroll and check in when the series is done. So here we are. I'm going to kind of structure this like I did my Kamen Rider Saber review. If you're not familiar with that, if you're just a viewer who has no idea what Kamen Rider Saber is, I'm going to kind of go over the positives and the negatives, the things I like and things that I didn't, and both will kind of blend into some mixed territory things of things that I have mixed feelings on, hence mixed. So let's go ahead and jump right into Adventure 2020 with the things that I liked. So as far as things I liked, superficially, I thought it was a very good-looking show. Like, you know, the animation wasn't always perfect. It wasn't the best-looking anime or animation I've ever seen, but I thought it was very good-looking, and it was especially really cool to see these Digimon in dynamic fights, because even though I think the series, the original series, holds up overall, a lot of the fights do look very turn-based. There was clearly a budget there. So it was really cool to see these more dynamic fights, and it certainly made it entertaining. I liked the style of the Digivolution animations, although I have some thoughts on why not everyone got them. I thought those looked really good. I really loved the way the digital world looked. I think that they kept the spirit and the vibe of what I liked about the design of the digital world in the original series, but just upped the beauty. I thought it was a very good-looking series. Also, kind of superficially, only because it doesn't have very much to do with the story, but I liked some of the ways that, like, branch or slide evolution were handled with this. In fact, I think it could have been even used more, since a lot of us knew what Digivolution forms were coming. But I really liked that sometimes there was different possible evolutions at different levels. And I thought that was neat, because if you go on the Digimon wiki, you know, I know it works a little differently, but you'll see like, oh, so-and-so can digivolve into these 3 different Digimon. And that kind of reminded me of that, and I thought it was pretty cool. Like how Patamon could digivolve to Pegasusmon and Angemon. It seemed like that was only for a while because he was kind of gaining up the strength to have Angemon again, but then he could use Pegasusmon later. But still, I liked that idea. There's probably some purists out there be like, but he's an armored Digimon! Well, not in this universe. One use of Ponchomon, which is only once, and only one Blitz Greymon, which surprised me. Which again, because we already knew all the Digivolutions, I would have loved to have seen this concept expanded on more. I also really like how they explained how wild Digimon digivolve and they fight each other and absorb each other's data. That's something they never really delved into in the original series and most other series. And I thought that was just really cool the way they went about that in general. Also, for a positive, I would say that I really like the mythology. I think the mythology was really well thought out. I thought the original had a good mythology too, but this one felt a little bit more in depth, really interesting. I loved the idea of the Digimon being these reincarnations of these ancient warriors, and TK and Kari's Digimon being the reincarnations of the holy Digimon, and it kind of gave them more a pinpoint reason for them being special, which was never really addressed. I mean, it was kind of addressed in the original series, but not really ever explained. Felt like it mixed a little bit of the original series design along with some other series design, because it felt a little bit frontier-y and some stuff from the video games. So it felt like a little bit of mismatch of some new stuff and some stuff from other Digimon series, but I still really liked the lore, and I was always eager to find more out about it. There was also some interesting stuff with the lore, like really tying Angemon to Devimon's origins. I thought that was really fascinating and one of the really cool parts of it. Like, it was one of my favorite episodes, was the Devimon-focused one on Angemon, when you learn about their past and how that all went down. And then they kind of tied that to the themes about light and dark and creation and destruction, which happened at the very end. Like, they highlighted that with the sort of yin and yang of Angemon and Devimon and Gatomon and her Nightmon thing. I thought it kind of came around in a really nice way, and there was little bits of mythology like that that I really appreciated, and I thought that was really cool. Also, I guess this could go into the superficial category, but I loved how inhabited the world was by different Digimon. Like, when the original series came out, there wasn't nearly as many Digimon designed, and I remember talking about this in one of my catch-up reviews, as it kind of reminded me of watching the original Pokemon anime, and then watching it now, when in background scenes, the Pokemon Center scenes, you'll see Pokemon from all the different regions instead of just Kanto because they've been invented now. And that's what this felt like, is you saw Digimon from all across the other animes, all across the games, across the card games. I'm sure for the more hardcore fans that like play every video game, a lot of these Digimon were, you know, oh, I've seen that before. But some of them I'd never seen before because I don't play every game. I haven't played the card game since I was younger, so there was a lot of new Digimon to me, but also a lot that I recognized. I think that they did this in some other series too. I think like Frontier and one other one had them, but there was quite a bit of those what-if armor forms of the 02 Digimon. I remember those, they first came out during the card game, and that little Digimon game, like, I forget the name, the little PDA they had, and you could play a game where you did Digivolutions with them, and I was always fascinated by those. It was like, you know, what if Halcyon used the Crest of Courage and stuff like that. There was a lot of those Digimon, which was really cool, and like I said, a lot of Digimon from different series. In fact, it was almost weird to see partner Digimon from other Digidestin and other series as wild Digimon. Because, again, it kind of reminds me of Pokemon, like the starter seeing wild Bulbasaur. It's just weird. Also, guys, a Leomon survived the series. Now let's get on to the negatives. So pacing. The pacing for this was all over the place. It was all over the place. I mean, you started at kind of a breakneck pace. Actually, to be fair, I think the early episodes had a really solid pacing. It felt like we were getting to know all the characters individually and getting to know the world at a fast but reasonable pace that didn't feel too fast. But then after that, it felt like we were going a million miles an hour. But then after a while, you realized we were running on a hamster wheel because we were going really fast, but we were going nowhere. Because the action in every episode and all this events and danger gave you this false sense that a lot was happening when really a lot wasn't happening. And they really took their time with things like TK and Kari, which bothered me. I'm going to have a whole little chunk on that for personal reasons. But it was strange because it felt like it was going really, really fast towards this Millennium Mon thing, and then you kind of realized the action was giving you this false sense. And then when we got to the first sort of Millennium Mon focus, then we slowed way down and did all these filler episodes about meeting Digimon in the digital world. And then we sped up a little bit, we finished the Millennium Mon stuff, and then we slowed way down and did all these filler episodes. And then we did the final conflict. And it gave it this weird, like, chart of, like, it felt weird. And I really hate to compare this to the original series, because I want to be clear, I'm never the nothing beats the original, somehow this new version erased my memories of the original and my enjoyment. I'm not that type of person. And I don't want this to be like the original. When it comes to reboots and anything, I want them to do whatever they want. Go as far away from it as possible. I'm not interested in seeing the same thing. But I couldn't help but think about how the original did things that I liked more in terms of the pacing. Like, it wasn't a perfect show, but I thought the general pacing and escalation of the story felt natural, and this one felt like a stop and start. Because the original series filler was more at the beginning, and it was more used to introduce us to the characters, to the Digimon, and to the world, and it worked well. And in this, it almost felt reactionary. It felt like they knew that people liked that about the original or something, and they're like, oh, we're going way too fast, let's slow down. And it made it feel weird and unnatural. And they tried to tie it at the end about, like, the Digidestin were here for more than fighting, they were here to make friends and help the digital world, which was a nice note, and I think meeting all these different groups of Digimon did replicate that feeling to a degree you got in the original series, where we met these different Digimon at these different times that had specific connections with all the kids, and it came together at the end. But it felt really disjointed. I didn't enjoy the filler episodes meeting the Digimon of the world as much as I did the ones in the original, because for me personally, I thought it worked better at the front end of the series. And also, I felt those episodes did a really good job of introducing us to the digital world and these characters, but also teaching us about our own characters, which is going to segue in a minute here into one of my other negatives, which is lack of character development. But I felt like we were only learning about the filler Digimon character, and I wasn't learning very much about the Digidestin. I'm not saying we didn't learn anything, as I do think they have sometimes we focus and we learn something, but it didn't feel the same, and I think there was a better character progression, and I think how disjointed it was felt weird. It felt weird to feel like we were rushing towards this big Millennium Mon confrontation, and then slow down to the early part of Season 1 from the original series. It just felt so weird pace-wise, and over the course of the 67 episodes, I had the opportunity to watch it both weekly and binged, and it comes across weird both ways. As I said, that segues into my other major negative, which is character development and focus. I'm not saying there was a lack of character development completely, as there was times when I did feel like we learned about character traits and things about the characters. And again, I hate to compare it to the original series, but it was nowhere near that. And they clearly focused on Tai and Matt, and more so Tai. And I'm going to put a pin in this for a second, but about the Digivolution sequences. But Tai was clearly front and center, even more so than Matt. Like, I thought it was just going to be Tai and Matt, but even Matt felt like he got backgrounded. Yeah, sure, he got the Digivolution sequence, but especially in the last arc about the crests, I felt like he was a sidelined character. I felt like I saw Mimi and Joe more than I saw him. And so it was usually just Tai front and center with all these things, with everyone else feeling like B-list. And to be fair, in the original series, it was like that a little bit. Tai and Matt got more focused, they were the only ones to get megas, but I felt it was a little more balanced, and I felt the ensemble more. And I think in addition to putting Tai and Matt up front so much, they split the characters up way too much and in a weird way. And again, to be fair, in the original series they did that too. It's out of necessity, I think, because you have such a large cast. You don't want to have to write an episode where you just have 6 people in the background doing nothing every week. It makes sense. I feel like this is the reason we've never gotten such a big cast again after this. But they did that in the original series too. But I thought it was more well-balanced in the original series. The way they did it here, it felt like the splitting apart was too forced, it was too often, and then there would be too long before we saw other characters. This is a weird comparison to bring in, but it reminded me of like season 7 and 8 of The Walking Dead, where they would separate characters so often that you would be like, okay, this group's off here doing this, and then you wouldn't see them for the longest time. You'd almost forget that they existed. And that's what would happen here. And as a result of that, it made the lack of focus more prominent for certain characters, and I felt that by the end of the series, for me personally, this could be different for you, it hampered my ability to feel the bond between the 8 kids, as well as their bond to their digital world to a degree. I mean, maybe I felt more so individual characters like Mimi and Joe's bond to the characters in the digital world than I did the 8 kids. Like, in the original finale, I really felt the close-knit bond between the Digidestined and their Digimon and that whole group, and I just didn't feel that here because they were separating them so much, and even though we learned things about them, it wasn't as substantial. Just to give you an example from the original series, something that I liked that goes to both pacing and character development, is when we did the original filler episodes about the characters. In those original ones, we learned a lot about the characters' core conflict, with most of them had to do with something going on at home, whether it was Izzy's adoption, Sora's relationship with her mom, Joe's expectations of his family, that were then addressed in the middle arc with Myotismon, and then came to a conclusion with the final arc in the Dark Masters, and it had this wonderful sense of progression. So even though they were in the background compared to Tai and Matt, I felt like all of them had this complete arc that had this great trajectory. And I didn't feel like I learned something as substantial about these versions of the characters, and most of the reason I cared about them had to do with the fact that they look like characters I already cared about, and as a result, I didn't feel that bond as much. Even the final scenes in the final battle where they're getting support from Earth, I didn't feel that, because in the original series, you had them going to Earth and meeting their parents again, and their parents were watching, and I felt there was this emotional treasure that wasn't there. They're like, everyone's like, we're rooting for you. I'm like, you don't even know who they are. Now, I put a pin in these 2 things for my 2 other major negatives. One is superficial, is the Tai and Matt Digivolution sequences. I love the Digivolution sequences in these. Even the Insta ones that Sora and everyone else got were cool. But it really bothered me that not all of them got Digivolution sequences. It's probably a budget thing, but it seems so weird to me. Because I can't think of any other Digimon series where all the Digidestined didn't get Digivolution sequences so long as they were main characters. I mean, yes, there are series where characters like Tai and Matt will be the only ones that get certain forms, but everyone always got the Digivolution for the sequences they had. It just bothered me, and it was really jarring when we get to a part where they'd be like, Agumon, Digivolve too, and you like do the whole song and dance, and then Beelmon would be like, Beelmon, Digivolve. That bothered me on a superficial level. Also, for my other negative, this kind of goes in regards to pacing and stuff as well, is TK and Kari. Now, when this originally came out, something I was actually excited about was, oh, this is cool. We're going to be able to see Kari from the beginning, because she was effectively like the 6th Ranger, the 8th child. She came in later in the series, and I was like, this is going to be cool to see her with the group at the beginning and what they do with it. But then they took way too long to introduce TK and Kari. I understood they were special, and it became clear to me that they were waiting to talk about the Celestial Digimon as they were heading towards the statues at the beginning, but it went even past that. And that really bothered me. I just felt they took almost too long for it, and as a result, I felt like I got very little from TK in general. Kari I got a little bit more from, I think because of her story with Gatomon, but it bothered me how long they took with them. I feel like they shouldn't have copied that from the original series. And like even with TK, like instead of just having us take forever to get his champion form, it took forever to get the character in the show, period, which was just so strange to me. And it also bothered me a little bit that we repeated some stuff with a dark storyline with Ganoma. Again, as I mentioned, I like how they tied it with the Devimon thing and the parallel of light and darkness, but I felt we had an opportunity here to do something completely different with them. And even though it was kind of a surprise to have it tied to Dark Knightmon, who's a Cross Wars Digimon, it felt like we were running onto some samey territory as the original series, and I think that was a part where we actually had a chance to break away from something they did. And those were just two minor nitpicks that I had. If I had to get to an overall point, I feel like I was really complaining about the series, but I just had a lot of problems with it. But I thought it was a very solid series. I thought it was a very mixed but solid series. Like, a lot of my hang-ups, unfortunately, come from the original series. And again, it's not from a desire to see the same show again, but it's just that I've seen these exact same characters and everything feel natural, and everything that was feeling awkward about it then felt worse because I unfortunately had this thing in my mind. But I can tell you, even without the Adventure series in my head, just comparing it to other Digimon series and other series period, there's something awkward about this, the way this was paced, and I think the characters were really underserved, but it wasn't an entirely lack of an enjoyable show. You know, it had a lot of great action, it had some good story, it could be very engaging. I think the kids that are growing up with this will really like it. I still think it's a very solid anime, and I think people are too hard on it. I have some problems with it, but I wouldn't call it a bad show by any stretch of the imagination. It's still a really solid Digimon show, if not very, very imperfect. There's things that bother me, but I never really hated it. Sometimes I wouldn't look forward to it when we were in the filler arcs and stuff like that, but I think it just gets way too much hate for what it is. I also think that, not talking about the songs, because they played that Break the Chain song way too many times. I mean, they did that with Hey Digimon too, but it was Hey Digimon, and that reigns supreme. I'm not talking about the songs, but I really liked the score they had in this, like the background music score. It had a really kind of epic feeling score, just as a fine little thing there. But if I had to score the series overall, I would give it a 3 out of 5. I think it was mixed but solid, and I think that newer fans will enjoy it, whether they're young or they're just getting into Digimon without the hang-ups. But I still think it has some problems that I really feel like I would still have even if I hadn't seen the original Adventure. I'm considering doing a video where I compare the series just for fun, not in a, nothing beats the original nostalgia fan type of way, but just for fun to compare and contrast what they did similar, what they did different, what I liked better in each, because I didn't want to dip into that too much. Unfortunately, I needed it for some of my examples, but I was thinking of doing that video, so maybe let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that. As of this recording, I've already started covering Ghost games, so look forward to that. But what did you guys think of Digimon Adventure 2020 overall? How did you like it compared to the original anime? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.